thank you guys all for coming here tonight and joining in. We have a very special guest tonight. Diane Hardy with the Mom and Pop Alliance is going to be joining us to present on ESG and some of the concerns and things of that nature that are impacting us in the state, especially those in the business world. I know this, for one, we've had a lot of good meetings lately. This is what I'm really excited to hear from. So thank you all for coming out tonight. To get us started, I'm going to open us up with a word of prayer, and then we'll follow with a pledge. Bow your heads with me. Dear Heavenly Father, God, thank you for allowing us to come here today, God, to live in a nation where we can freely gather, come as friends and family to meet, learn about the things that are going on in our world, and live a life that honors you and not have a fear of death or things of that nature that goes on in so many places of the world. God, be with us tonight. Allow us to gain wisdom from what is said here. Allow us to honor you with our actions. It's through Jesus I pray. Amen. All right. If you'll join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for So I'll give you guys, since we have a handful of new faces here tonight, a quick rundown on who we are. We're the Pickens County Republican Club. We're an auxiliary under the South Carolina Republican Party. And we do a few things with this club. We have a balloon. That's got to be a sign of something. Where does this come from? So we're an auxiliary organization under the South Carolina Republican Party, and we have two main areas of focus, being town hall events and freedom rallies. Tonight's one of our town hall events where our goal is to educate the voters. So you guys are all voters, I hope to register to vote. Some of you folks are running for office, which is exciting to see you here. So our goal is to educate the voters, get the word out on elections, put a platform forward for people to come and share their message if they're running for office. So that's a few of our goals here as an organization. Everybody's welcome. Everybody's going to be treated with respect. If somebody that's as far right as you can get comes in, we're going to treat them with respect. And if somebody that's let's say a left-wing communist, may not agree with them, may say, hey, I hope you change, we'll still treat them with respect. So that's who we are as an organization. To get us started tonight, though, one of our candidates that's here is Rick Tate, who is a member of our organization. Rick is running for Easley Combined Utilities Commissioner, and Rick's going to say a few words, share a little bit about the ECU and his candidacy. So here's Rick.
I promise to be very brief. I guess the most important thing I could tell you is if you're like me in years gone by, I really didn't understand what a utilities commissioner did or what the job was. Easley Combined Utilities is a municipality-owned utility, which simply means it's owned by the citizens of Easley. It's not a for-profit company. It is it's a government entity. It's the reason you elect commissioners to oversee it for the citizens of Easley. The responsibilities are roughly the same as a county councilman, a city councilman, a school board member. Works and operates the same way. If you go to a commission meeting, you'll see it all goes down at a commission meeting just like it does at a city council meeting or a county council meeting. You have an administrator who oversees the day-to-day operation. The city council, county council, school board comes in. They get a briefing from the administrator. The administrator makes recommendations. The council members, or the mayor, they debate what the information that had been given, and then they take a vote or take action on it or table it, or it's resolved one way or the other. Commission does the same thing. Instead of raising taxes or lowering taxes, they raise or lower rates. Anytime they spend money on an expansion, their pay, anything like that, it's added to your utility bill. That's the only source of revenue that Combined Utilities has, is your utility bill. So the connection between Combined Utilities and the city, they've touched at several points, but one of the main ones is if they want to borrow money for, say, an expansion due to growth or whatever, they have to go to the city government and ask for an ordinance for a bond issue, so they can borrow money, which is then paid back. I would only add to this, like I said, I'll keep it brief. My qualifications are basically that I'm the chairman of the Pickens County Public Service Commission. That gives me some experience on how wastewater treatment is managed and handled. You might be interested to know that and this is all you can call the ECU and verify this, our main facility in Easley is the Middle Branch. They're doing a modest increase in capacity at the moment. Even when that is completed, we will have room for 5% growth, or adding 5% capacity to that facility before we'll be back at the 80% mark, where you have to start making plans, serious plans under DHAC rules to add more capacity. We were lucky this last time with this modest increase in capacity. It's costing around $6 million. The next time around, it's going to be more like 40, 50, 60 million. And that's going to be added to your utility bill. And my input is simply this on that. If you annex property into the city, ECU has no choice but to provide services. It's a done deal. Yeah, they have to. ECU has to provide services. But if the city decides to not annex a piece of property, then it's up to the commissioners to vote on whether to expand its services outside the city to the county. It can be done, but it has to be voted on by the commissioners. My point is simply this. With the capacity issues that we have at the facility that handles 81% of the wastewater treatment for Easley, when you're only even with this improvement, when you're only 5% away from having to do a major upgrade, if I'm elected commissioner, I would be against and vote against expanding out into the county. I would want to preserve that capacity for the city where you are mandated to provide service, and try to manage this thing a little better. We've been operating, that facility has been operating under it's at 89.5 or 89.4% capacity now. It went past the 85% mark over 2 years ago. And we've been operating under a waiver from DHAC for that plant since then. I think we need to plan a little better and get a little further ahead of this thing. So if you're interested in what I have to say and you want to know more, I have a website. It's votericktate.com. It's easy to find. I'm also on Facebook, Vote Rick Tate. But I would advise going to the website, votericktate.com, and I would humbly ask for your, before I say goodbye, one last thing. I would make two changes. There's not a whole lot of point in pointing out problems if you don't offer solutions. Two major things, in my mind major anyway, would be combined utilities is in a unique position in that they are in contact with all of their customers every month. You get a bill. There's no reason when there's a major vote to happen that they can't notify you. So what I'm saying is, I think ECU would be well served by a newsletter that goes out with your bill so you can be made aware of things. Like 2 years ago, the commissioners gave themselves a raise from $11,500 a year to $21,900 a year. And the reason that I've been given is so they could provide themselves health insurance. So they have the money to go buy health insurance. Comparatively, the school board gets $3,000 a year in salary, and they don't get health insurance. And I bring that up because there was no public input on the vote to give them that raise. It should, in my world, or at my suggestion, if you're going to do something like that, it should have went out in a newsletter and advised people that was coming up, so that the people who are going to pay for the raise would actually have a voice in whether or not to provide it. It's that simple. Any other thing I would do is have town halls like this, like 3 times a year, every 4 months, and keep people abreast. There's other things you could do, like put a camera in the room for the meetings like they do at City Hall in Easley, so people can see and hear what's going on. But my main goal here, and the reason I'm running, is to raise public awareness and involve the voters who own Easley Combined Utilities in the decision-making process. And now I will say goodnight and go to votericktate.com, and I appreciate your patience and your listening to me. Diane's a lot more fun than I am.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. It's something I say every time. We had some of you guys were there. We had a candidate forum in Pickens just the other night on Tuesday night, and anybody that offers himself for service, whether you agree with them or not, it's an honorable thing to do because at the end of the day, it's not a high-paying job. It's not like you're going in and raking in the big bucks, especially in these local offices. It truly is a service, and anybody that's willing to put their name on the ballot and put themselves out there, that's a big ask. And I certainly appreciate you, Rick, Mayor Womack, David, Tommy, that are also running for sheriff. That's very honorable for you guys to be willing to serve your community like that. So. Without further ado, we have our main event tonight, Diane Hardy of the Mom and Pop Alliance. Diane is a business owner, and Diane, are you still on Nothing Bundt Cakes? If you want some good cakes, they make very good cakes. I was telling some of you guys, I'm not a big cake person, but I will eat a Nothing Bundt cake because they're very good. So without further ado, I'll invite Diane up to share a little bit more about the Mom and Pop Alliance, ESGs, and other things impacting our state. So give Diane a round of applause here. Let's get her going.
See if we get that any brighter. That's as bright as it goes. John, which one do you want me to use? Does it matter? John? Use it. Okay, all right. Let me get my clicker. Thanks so much for having me tonight. Let me know if, I know that this is a little bit, can you see the screen all right? Yeah? Okay. All right, so before I launch into this, I'll say just a couple things. I used to be a nurse anesthetist, and then I'm a small business owner now, and now the Mom and Pop Alliance. So quite an interesting journey for me. I did want to let you know a little bit about my why. We just had our sponsorship dinner, and I shared this. On the left there, you probably can't see it well, but that's my husband and I when we opened up Nothing Bundt Cakes. It'll be 7 years ago this Halloween. So, and it was unbelievable, like beyond ridiculous, the hoops and the red tape I had to go through to get that open. And so that's what got me interested, you remember, in the relationship between small businesses and government. And at that time, I was like, someday I want to do something about this. And then COVID hit, and I was like, okay, now's the time. So decided to launch this Mom and Pop Alliance. It's a statewide organization. We work at the state level of government, and we just provide a stronger voice for South Carolina's 430,000 small businesses. The middle photos there, that's me with my 80s hair. I'm just giving you a little bit of background about my personal why. Like, why would someone do this for free and travel the state and do everything that I do? Because I do not take a salary. But that's me in front of the Berlin Wall. And I got to go into East Berlin and see communism multiple times. And you see that bottom picture there. At the top there, it looks like 1920s. But this was 1980s. But that's how East Berlin looked. They still had the bullet holes in the walls of the buildings and things like that. So to me, economic freedom is very dear to my heart. There were very few options in the stores. There was very little to buy. The people were miserable, and it's because they did not have any prosperity because they lacked economic freedom. I'm not saying we're at that point, but I am saying that it's really important for small businesses to have support and not make it difficult for them. And then the photo on the right is, the guy on the right is my dad. He was a Marine, and he was in Korean War, and I really treasure the value, the sacrifice our vets have made. And so that's another reason why I donate my time to this alliance. So a little bit about us. This is what we do. We provide advocacy, communication, and education, bringing together the needs, the communication of small business owners to our state level elected officials. And we, these are some of the issues we've been working on. We did help with a lot of other groups. It wasn't just us, but we did work on certificate of need. How many of you know what certificate of need is? You know, where they, so now getting rid of our certificate of need should help lower healthcare costs and increase accessibility for all of us. And then, so that one was already, we won that one last session. It took a long time. So we're working on some tax relief. And then also this liability reform is a huge problem. You may have been hearing about restaurants and all having difficulty getting liability insurance because of the unique laws that South Carolina has, and we're going to need to make some changes there. So Senate Bill 533 is one we're going to be helping with other groups, because liability insurance for all businesses, not just restaurants, is outrageous in our state. But one of the biggest things we've been working on is ESGs. And this is a talk that I've put a lot of time in. I'm continuously updating it, and I have traveled the state. I have been everywhere from Aiken to Hardyville to Myrtle Beach to Florence to Charleston to Bluffton. So you're not the first folks to hear this. ESGs, well, before I get into ESGs, this is one other thing we do. We bring popcorn. We have our signature popcorn. We bring it to all 170 state legislators multiple times throughout the session. And what we do is we search for good model legislation across the country and then bring those bills, so that like S533, that will be on that little card with our popcorn. And then we go and deliver the popcorn to all their offices. And we do that multiple times throughout the session. It's always good to have a little food, and it kind of opens doors, so it's awesome. All right, so ESGs. How many of you know pretty well what an ESG is and what it's about? Okay, so maybe half. Okay. So hopefully this is going to keep you up to date. I do have to warn you, this is an extremely complex topic. I'm going to try and keep it as interesting as possible and as simple to understand as possible. I always want to shorten it, but then I look at the slides and I'm like, no, that part, that needs to stay in there. You got to know that. So kind of prepare yourselves a little bit mentally. I know it's the end of the day, but try and prepare yourselves a little bit mentally, like you're in a high school or college class for just a little while, because there is a lot to this. But like I said, I'll try and keep it as simplified as possible. But there is a lot to it. So this is our agenda tonight. What we're going to go through is we're going to go what ESGs are. So those of you who aren't sure, I hope you'll leave here having a pretty good understanding. We also have a great article you could read as a follow-up. They're coming from two completely differing worldviews. We'll get into the who, what, and why of ESGs. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about them globally, and then we're going to talk about them at the U.S. level, and then we're going to talk about them at the state level of South Carolina. You'll completely understand why businesses are going woke and the impact of small businesses and individuals, and then the national awakening that finally happened, and I was thrilled about, because this is such a complex topic. I really didn't think our country would wake up in time, but we are starting to, which is great. And I'll let you know what our organization's doing and what you can do about them. So ESGs, it is a social credit score, right now mainly placed on large corporate businesses, and it's where the businesses get graded on various topics. So they get graded on their behavior, but what they would like to do is have this trickle down to small businesses, and the goal is to have these ESG social credit scoring system trickle down to individuals. So that's why even if you don't own a business, you should care and understand what this is. So what happens then, instead of businesses focusing on the goods and services and trying to provide the best service or product to their customers, they are worried about their ESG score, because they're being constantly compared with other businesses. And those that have a higher score get lots of carrots, and those that have a low score can have sticks. They can have trouble with finances. Those that have a good score can get easy permitting. They can get government grants. They can get all kinds of things. So it behooves a business to have a high ESG score in this world today. These are some of the books I read to prepare for this. When I first started studying this topic, I really didn't think it would be anything mom and pop would take up, because I really saw it as a big corporate issue. But then once I learned more about it, that it's actually designed to hit small businesses, that's when I thought we really need to dive into this deeper as an organization. I read tons of articles. I try and keep up with most of the articles, and people are always sending me great articles so I can keep up with the latest. I try. Okay, so where this is coming from is two completely differing worldviews, and you can kind of feel this globally. Like, I think England's experiencing this, and other countries are experiencing this. You have these decentralized decision makers. That's probably most of us in this room and most small business owners. We believe in individualism, free markets, self-government. equality, not equity, liberty, things like that. And then you have these centralized decision makers. They're kind of the philosopher kings, if you will. And they really believe that the people are ignorant and it's best if they have experts guiding them. They believe very strongly in administrative states, large institutions, utopian society. If we would just follow their guidance, we could reach that utopian society. Not crazy about their founding principles, and they believe that really the few, the smart and selfless few, should rule the many. So that's where that's where we're having these two world views clashing in our globe right now. These are some of the organizations, and there's plenty others, Clinton Global Initiative and a lot of other ones that aren't on this list. But this is the list of those that are promoting and pushing ESGs in the world right now. So you have the major governments, pretty much the Western governments, and then you have multinational corporations, the UN, the IMF, and the World Economic Forum. How many of you are aware of the World Economic Forum? Okay, so maybe about half. So this is Klaus Schwab. He runs the World Economic Forum, and this is a little bit about him. He's a professor. He started it in '71. They usually have about 3,000 attendees. And they very much care about climate change, so they make sure they all bring their private jets to this. And they very much care about diversity, so they hold it in the least diverse place in the world. And just to give you an idea, it is the who's who of the globe. It is the big CEOs, the leaders. This is a list of the attendees from 2022, and this is super small print. And you can look at, everybody who came to this, CBS News. I mean, it just goes on and on. Honeywell, just plus all the leaders. So this is who's going to this World Economic Forum, deciding for us what is best for the world. And it's run by Klaus Schwab. And this is a quote from Klaus Schwab. Every industry from oil and gas to tech must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism. And that's what this is about, resetting capitalism and also resetting the way decision-making happens in countries. So we don't really go through a democratic process so much, but more through this system. This past year in 2023, they said that 2023 is going to be the year of the polycrisis. So we're going to have lots of crises in 2023. And it feels that way, right? I mean, so they were clairvoyant in knowing that. And these are just some examples of who attended in 23. You have our FBI director going to this, a bunch of CEOs, 600 of them, congressmen, senators, Brian Kemp. Now, he may have gone just to see what's happening. I'm not saying that everybody who goes to this is on board and ascribes to what they're pushing. They may just go to see what's happening. Zelensky's there and Janet Yellen. So, and that's just a handful of the people that were there this past year. And thank goodness you have people like Ron DeSantis. He really gets this issue. And he said things like the World Economic Forum, those policies are DOA in Florida. Many states don't have the courage to say that because they don't want to hurt their states regarding international and corporate companies coming into their states. So good for him for speaking out and speaking truth. This, I know you can't read it at all, but if you went through the World Economic Forum's website, it would probably take you months and months and months. There's so much there. There's videos. There's so much stuff. This is one of their things, a digital identity. They want to have smart cities, and then they want to be able to surveil what's happening in the smart cities, how much fuel you're using, things like that. So this is the things they want to get to. This is the Clinton Global Initiative meeting, and the ESG czar was asked, where's the money going to come from? And she said, well, just like COVID, we found $17 trillion for COVID. The money must be there somewhere. Because this ESG is super expensive. It adds a cost to every single step of the supply chain of anything you buy. So ESGs have been around for a very long time. We haven't heard about them because if you speak of them, you will get canceled or, dinged in some way. So, but they actually started 2005. The UN launched the Principles of Responsible Investing, And by 2017, they had 1,600 asset managers at 62 trillion. And so this money gets used kind of, I hate to use the word weaponized, but kind of like if your company doesn't do what you want, we're going to pull our investment out and your stock's going to tank. So that's why companies are going along with the, in my opinion, the wokeness. So it's like a woke score. The more woke you are, the higher your score will go, in my opinion. But so people who say, well, this isn't really a big deal, but really, if you look at this, thousands of companies in more than 50 countries, and most of those countries, Western countries, have an ESG system in place, including 82% of U.S. companies, large U.S. companies. It's something I forgot to say at the beginning of this. When I go through this, it's going to be a little bit concerning and depressing, and it's going to sound like a lot of bad news. But then we're going to get to the smiley face. And when you get there, then it's going to be what's being done about ESGs. And just a year ago when I would give this talk, what you get after the smiley face wasn't much. But it keeps growing. So there is good news at the end of this. So hang on. And like I said, there is kind of a lot of information here. But ESGs are completely arbitrary and subjective. They are constantly changing. So there's no standards. It's not like accounting standards where you have a standard and everybody follows it. They're constantly changing. And I think that might be by design. They say they'd like to standardize them, but I don't know if they're ever going to do that really. So that means ESGs, this is how you push through a social agenda through a society without using the democratic process. So you can get all kinds of things through without anybody taking a vote and without any debate or anything at all. You don't have to convince the people. You just do it through this ESG system, and it'll go down into the society. So interestingly, in Europe, ESGs are very focused on fertilizer. You've probably seen this with the Netherlands and why the farmers are so upset. That's because their fertilizer's been taken away from them. They're not allowed to use nitrate fertilizer, and they're going out of business because they have to farm completely organically, and there is not enough, that's not producing enough food. So they had Sri Lanka also, you may have seen that, they're having problems. So the food and the fuel prices are going way up because of the climate change and then also the fertilizer issue. In our country, they're not focusing as much on fertilizer. They're focusing more on race, fuel, guns, and LGBTQ. Now, all of this is also happening in Europe, but for our country it's really, right now, you're feeling the LGBTQ of this piece. But it's race, it's whatever they want it to be. These are some of the U.S. players. You got the large asset managers, but it's not just these three. It's almost any big company that you put your money into, that you do a large investment fund, is going to want to be somewhat ESG compliant. Vanguard, I put an X there because the Texas legislature called them in, all three of these guys, they called all three of them in, and started asking them questions. And Vanguard got a little uneasy with it, said, you know what, we'll just pull out of the Climate Action 100. So that shows you that states can do something about this. Texas brought them in, and they pulled out of that. Activist investors, nonprofits, NGOs are really pushing this, big banks, corporate CEOs, risk management companies. There is a ton of money to be made in ESG compliance. And then our government is really pushing this. So if you have a government contract and you're a company, you don't want to lose it. So you better be ESG compliant and jump through whatever hoops and push whatever agenda they're wanting at the time. This is very concerning. Most people are not aware, well, people are not aware of this at all. We did write an article in Fitz News to bring awareness to it. But our National Governors Association formed a partnership in 2018 with the World Economic Forum. So when the governors go to these conferences, they have that World Economic Forum influence in it. So how brilliant is that? If you want to influence and change a country, if you just can control those 50 people or influence those 50 people, you can change a nation very quickly. And that might be why we saw some of the responses in COVID with the governors being very similar, because they go to these conferences and learn about this. This is our article in Fitz News about it. This is Mom and Pop Alliance Uncovers Disturbing Partnership, and this is about the National Governors Association with the World Economic Forum. So asset managers, I mentioned to you about BlackRock. BlackRock is the one you hear about. They're kind of the poster child for this just because they're the biggest one. But like I said, they're not the only one. And he believes Larry Fink runs this. He had $10 trillion in assets. Some of the states pulled out of their funding, so it's gone down a little. Unfortunately, we still do have all our funds with BlackRock, and that's not our treasurer's fault. It's not under his domain. It's under a different person. So, and we have South Carolina's money in BlackRock because they pay us to be in BlackRock. So we believe sustainability should be our new standard of investing. It's extremely hypocritical when you think that China is opening up a coal-fired plant about every 2 weeks, and he invests a ton in China. In fact, BlackRock is using Americans' retirement savings to fund Chinese Communist Party's military. There are Chinese companies that are blacklisted that we're not supposed to be investing in because the money goes to the military, and BlackRock's investing in them. But yet they want to lecture everyone else about LGBTQ and climate change and things like that. These are some of the activist investors. As you saw, the Southern Poverty Law Center, you may have heard of that one. But the one I wanted to talk about was the bottom one, Human Rights Campaign, HRC. What the HRC did is they developed their own ESG. So now there's another score that companies are dealing with. And they keep moving the goalposts. They keep making the ability to have a good CEI score. So now there's another one. There's a CEI score. The CEI has to do with LGBTQ stuff and trans stuff. So like, I know you can't read this, but like at the bottom, it talks about responsible citizen. Basically, if you're doing business with a Christian company whose mission includes advocacy against anything LGBTQ that they think is not LGBTQ promoting, you can lose 25 points. So this is why you see companies not only going woke about the climate stuff and talking about sustainability and green, but they have to have a good CEI score now too. And so that's how the CEI score is calculated. So that's why you see things like this. And I'm not sure that Bud Light really wanted to do this or realized what they were doing. I mean, I know it was a lower level marketing manager, and this is how you can have tremendous influence. We have 10 major companies in our country own almost all of the brands. And so if you can do ESG with those 10 big companies, then then all the companies below them have to be ESG compliant. And this is, I think out of all of those companies, most of these companies don't want to do this. They feel they have to, or they're going to lose, like I said, they could lose a lot of things. Some of them are true believers, though, and are actually pushing this agenda, and of that, I would say Unilever is the one. He would like to make ESG ratings mandatory, and so of all of those companies, I showed you those 10, this I think is probably the worst one because they are true believers and they are actually forcing it on everyone. A lot of those other companies, I don't know if they really buy into this. They just don't want their stock to completely tank if BlackRock pulls everything out. So those are the Unilever products. So I was mentioning this is really a huge moneymaker. So we'll have a lot of people in this country who are going to not want ESGs to go away. There's a ton of money to be made when you think of the big accounting firms, the top 4. ESG compliance is a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of work. So it's a lot of money to be made. Then you have the ESG compliance companies, the human resource companies, continuing education. So corporate lawyers, I've had them send to me ads where they have to go and get continuing education on ESGs, as do all HR people. And then you have that DEI, that diversity, equity, inclusion training in the corporations and also in local government and all that. So there's a lot of money to be made. This is an example of an ESG report, and it constantly has to be updated, and it's pages and pages. And so when you think of this as insurance, every single level, everything you buy, every service you need is generating these reports, and the reports have to constantly change to stay up with the new compliance standards. So you can see this is a very big cash cow for a lot of people. So then you get into, if the government can print money, they can literally force ESG because they give grants to private companies that are ESG compliant. So when you can print the money and you can reward ESG compliance, and then you can punish non-compliance through taxing and permits and things like that. So this is an example. This just is in here to show you what is at risk for these companies if they don't play ball. It says government agencies are beginning to use ESG scores to grant businesses permission for land, water, electricity, a variety of crucial resources based on their ESG score. So they don't want to lose access to these things, of course. So why are businesses going woke? Well, we have the true believers. I told you about that. The Unilever, I think maybe Target's probably in that group, the true believers. Cloak of self-righteousness. So they can talk about what they're doing for women's rights or for gay rights or for racial inequities rather than cover up other atrocities. Maybe they have some slave labor going on, whatever, in China. For economic survival, I think this is where a lot of them fall in. When we kind of made that point about you kind of have to play game or you could lose a lot of things. Want to be in compliance and are aware of the negative of ESGs. A lot of businesses have no idea the downside of ESGs. They just know it's something they have to do and they are following, they're just checking a box. And then really a big part of this is they're afraid of the mob. They're afraid of the social media mob. They're afraid of people picketing outside of their companies. They're also afraid of their employees because college kids are taking ESG classes, and this is a religion for many of them. And the employees are demanding this from upper management. So it's a real mob mentality also feeding into this. So this little cartoon says, America will abandon fossil fuels by 2050. What's China's goal? For America to abandon fossil fuels by 2050. And this is in here because China does not do any of this ESG. They are considered a developing nation. But they are pushing it on us. They would like, I think behind the scenes they are doing PR to push ESG. I can't prove that. But so we are doing all this to ourselves, the West and Europe, but China is not. So it gives them a tremendous advantage. All right, so this is a new law. It was passed just end of last year. What this says is all European companies must be ESG compliant. So in our country, it's not the law. The SEC would like to have that type of enforcement, but they don't. So it does not come through SEC. There's just carrots and sticks that make it happen. But actually in Europe, it is the law. So when we bring in European international companies to South Carolina, they will have to do ESG in our state, and so will the vendors downstream from that company, because it's European law that it has to be done. So we need to keep this in mind as we bring in multinational companies from Europe. And I told you that it's not mandatory yet in the US. So you'll see different names. It used to be called, I don't know if you could say for sure Build Back Better is exactly ESG, but this is part of the Build Back Better plan, Great Reset, Green New Deal. It used to be called CSR. It used to be called Corporate Responsibility. Then that kind of got a bad name, so they changed it to ESG. Now they're talking about calling it conscientious investing. So you'll see these articles, people have been sending them to me, they're all excited, and it says ESG is dead, or we're ashamed of ESG. But what they're saying is if you read the full article, we're ashamed of the term of ESG, and now we're going to call it this, or ESG, the term of ESG is dead. So, and there's also articles out there that say ESG investing's not happening anymore, or is on the decline. That's certain ESG funds that are only for ESG. So we still haven't gotten rid of it. You'll see some titles, some things, and it sounds exciting, but if you dig in, it's still really not changed that much. So where this gets really concerning is if you link an ESG to a government digital dollar, because now your score can be linked to what you're spending and your money. So now they know how much gas you're using, and if you're using way too much gas in that big boat of yours, well, you don't need to be doing that. So that's when we get into the concern of a digital dollar run by the government and an ESG score. We're not there yet, but that's definitely a concern. This has happened. This is called FedNow. Have you guys ever heard of FedNow? anyway, it's not a digital dollar, but it is a federal instant payment system, kind of like Venmo or Cash App. It's kind of like one of those, except it's run by our government, so they can see everything that you're transactioning, where your cash is going. And I'm not really sure why we need this, since we have private ones that are doing the same thing. This is Jerome Powell just saying that there are a lot of changes happening in our monetary system, and we do need to at least start exploring a CBDC, a central bank digital currency. So they're starting to examine it as an option. And Ron DeSantis, Florida is the only state in the country that has blocked CBDC. He and his state house he signed a bill saying there will be no CBDC in Florida. And so we really need that here in South Carolina. Our governor, I don't know if he really sees, he doesn't see this issue the way DeSantis does, in my opinion, let's put it that way. But thank goodness Tom Corbin did get a bill based on the Florida bill introduced into session last year. And you know, we have a 2-year session. So we have this year to get this bill through. And it's modeled after the Florida bill, and it would block CBDC in South Carolina. So super important for us to work on that. Texas is doing a different thing. I don't know a lot about this. I didn't spend a lot of time in a deep dive on this, but they're doing they're trying to get their own currency going. So if the dollar collapses and they don't have to go to CBDC, they're going to go to a Texas-backed currency. I don't know where this is. It says they've had 2.5 million people come to their website and inquire, but I don't know. But just that's what they're doing. Okay, so this is going now to the federal level. We have a law, some of you may have heard of it, it's called an ERISA law. And it means that if you have employment, any of you who have a retirement account, it means that by law, that retirement account has to be invested in your best interest. The fiduciary duty is for you to make the most money from that retirement account they can. That's been the law since '74. What happened was the Department of Labor upended that law and just wrote, no, now ESG will be considered as much, if not more, than fiduciary duty. So obviously the Department of Labor shouldn't just upend a law and rewrite it, but that's what they did. And Joe Biden, so let me go back for a minute before I get to this. So what the Department of Labor did was so egregious and such an overreach that even our current federal senators and congressmen said, no, we can't do this. So they actually passed a bill, the one time they worked together, and they passed a bill saying, no, the Department of Labor is not allowed to do that. And I was so thrilled, because I was like, wow, I didn't think that would happen. And then Joe Biden used his first veto, and he vetoed that. So right now, the Department of Labor upending that law is where we stand right now. But because we have the checks and balances, there will be a lawsuit, because it's highly illegal what they did. And 25 states are suing over that and trying to block what the Department of Labor did. And South Carolina is in on this lawsuit. So we've done pretty well with the lawsuits. We're in on most of the ones we need to be. Now I'm going to give you a couple examples, and I could give you hundreds, but these are just real-life examples of ESG impacting average citizens. So, or various things. So Moms for Liberty, I think I got a Moms for Liberty person here. So their PayPal was just instantly stopped. No warning. It was stopped, and they couldn't access their funds. And Ron DeSantis came to the rescue on this one. He really spoke out hard, and he said they're using things like social credit scores to marginalize people they don't like, which is true. And because he spoke publicly on that the way he did, they felt pressure, and they did give the Moms for Liberty access to their own money. So that's how it can happen, just instantly lose access to your money because they don't like what you're doing. This was a Dilbert cartoon. They wrote a really cute cartoon about ESGs. It was kind of funny. And as soon as they did this cartoon, it was canceled in 77 newspapers. And this is why we're not hearing about ESGs. People are afraid to speak out about it. And it's been very well under the radar. This lady, she's an attorney. She worked for a nonprofit, and she was asked to sign a statement that said all white people are racist and I am no exception. And she refused to sign that. And she is now suing. So I wish her success in that. So how does this impact a small business? Obviously, we're going to have increased fuel prices and increased food prices, because everything, all these reports have to be done, and then you have the regulations on the fuel and things like that. But larger companies are expected to get ESG information. So this information is supposed to feed up to the big company. And we aren't quite fully there yet. So this kind of describes it. You have the World Economic Forum and the governments and all pushing the ESG on the right down. Here are the compliance factors. They're constantly changing. You better keep up. You better have all your... and that goes from the investment firms to the big companies. Then the mid-sized vendors have to do ESG so they can work with the bigger vendors. And then the small businesses have to do ESG so they can get stuff from vendors. So like if you're doing landscaping for a hotel, like a big Marriott hotel, even if you're just a small family business, that Marriott has to get those ESG scores from the small business, or they're going to lose their contracts with Coca-Cola or whoever. They're not going to be able to, they're not going to get the contracts for the conferences and things. So this is how it is. The compliance needs to be fed up and the ESG factors come down. And this is an actual example. So this has not gone... We're trying to stop it from impacting small businesses further. We are starting to see some ESG surveys being sent to small business owners. So this is an ESG survey. I know you can't read it, but it's an actual survey sent to a very small mom and pop company. I think they have one or two, two employees. And it says something in here like, it's basically, what is your environmental footprint and how are you determining it and things like that. So these questions will need to be answered and submitted up, or you could lose access to that vendor or that account. And I myself had a code of conduct. I didn't know they were going to do it this way, but it was a code of conduct agreement. We were going to sell cake to this company, wanted cake for a big luncheon they were doing. And they sent me a 7-page code of conduct letter, all about sustainability, all about inclusivity, all this stuff. And I had to read that contract, all 7 pages, and sign it, or we're not allowed to sell cake to them. So it's starting, because I've seen it personally. It is just starting, and that's why we need to speak out, because people are like, oh, Diane, she's just exaggerating, but we really want to stop it before it gets worse. And this is just to clarify, our organization is fully supportive of people who want to invest their own money knowingly, fully informed, in an ESG fund. If you think that this is helping the planet and you think it's a really good thing, and you say to your advisor, please put all my money in an ESG fund because I really want it to go there. That's great, good for you. But what this says, what we have issue with is all of that money going into ESG funds without us all knowing it. And especially any of our state retirements and all of our personal retirements going in and then being weaponized to make these companies do the bidding of the World Economic Forum and others. So just want to make that point clear that I don't have a problem with people knowingly putting in ESG funds. Ironically, though, that top part, the knowing ESG funds are collapsing. People aren't doing it. So that's what they're talking about when they say ESG isn't succeeding. So businesses are going to be graded on their ESG score. There is talk of getting an individual ESG score. So like if you're an insurance company, you wouldn't want to insure someone's car who has a super bad ESG score, because then that's going to lower your ESG score as a company. Or you need to at least charge them more. So we're not there yet. I'm not saying that's happening, but that is where they want to get to. And these are some of the things that they would like to grade you on your individual ESG score. So if you need to get insurance for your boat or for your vehicles, they're going to want to look at some of this stuff, and they can get some of this just from your social media, your online profile. But your investments, your purchase history, your nonprofits, how you use energy, how you're traveling, things like that. Incidentally, we did have a business owner that they were asked, how many EVs do you have, how many gas-powered vehicles, how many gallons are you using a week in your business, things like that. So they would like to get that at the individual level. Also at the individual level, this is real. There is a company that you can use, and you can ask them, can you please give me an ESG score of this employee? I'm thinking about hiring them, but I'd like to know what their personal ESG score is before I hire them. So this is a company that will do that for you. Okay, now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about what's happening in our state. This all needs to be fought at the state level. You see with Biden vetoing that one bill, this could all be stopped immediately at the federal level, but we all know that's not going to happen anytime soon, if ever. So we have to push back at the state level. And so this is something, we wrote an article about this also. We went to this event, it was at Furman, and I don't know if you can read this, but it says something like, do you think corporations have a responsibility to manage climate change, or something like that, the little sign said on the left there. And it was like, yes, that's where all those dots are, and no was on the right-hand side. So we went to this event, our team, it was at Furman, it was a 3-night event hosted by Al Gore, and we were all given a little sticker, and the college kids were given an orange sticker, and old people like me were given a blue sticker. And we had to put on there. So this is really, that sign on the left is a soft peddling of ESG. So you see everybody thought, yes, it's up to those companies. They better, they're responsible for climate change. And then there were a few people, the blue stickers are my team, so we were the only old people who said no. And then some college students got it. But it really was kind of like, it's a way of kind of talking about ESG without calling it that. So Al Gore was piped in by Zoom, and he was introduced by U.S. Representative Republican Bob Inglis. And he said, we're in the early states of a sustainable revolution, reimagining agricultural alternatives to meat. Before we went in, we all had meatless appetizers, and we toured an electric bus. And then he says, Inflation Reduction Act, the biggest investment in climate solutions by far, funding for environmental justice. So that's where this is coming in. They have the Inflation Reduction Act funds and environmental justice, and they get to decide what's just, is what is coming. You'll hear that term a lot more, I think. We wrote 2 articles on that. Well, we wrote one article because it was a conservative senator who was on the stage with them. So we wrote an article about that, and this was just an objective article about what we saw at that Furman event, and then the senator's response is on the right. But if you want to look it up, it's actually a really interesting article. It's in Fitz News, and it's called Strange Bedfellows at Furman University Forum. And I was very surprised to see this senator there. So this lady, she works for Al Gore, and she was a big part of the event. She's a Furman grad, and this day, she was so excited because California was talking about how they're going to ban gas-powered vehicles going forward. And she was just ecstatic about that. And she didn't realize that it was the exact same day, it was about a year ago almost, you might remember when California said, please don't use a lot of electricity, our grid's shaky, it might go down. It was the exact same day of this event, and she was thrilled about EVs being, mandatory. But the bigger important point is, she said Inflation Reduction Act money will move through the tax code as grants to individual companies, so this is how they give outright cash to reward a company, and through state houses. So this is $300, and I think it was $69 billion for the Inflation Reduction Act, just a total slush fund to push through this environmental justice, in my opinion. And so they're going to start pushing it through state houses to get this accomplished. Senator Tom Davis, Beaufort was there, and he's a very powerful senator. He's been in for a good while, and I've always liked him. But he was there, and he said what opportunities there may be for this money to further our decarbonization efforts, need to determine how we equitably allocate these funds, must have fair allocation of costs, there are externalities with coal generation. So in other words, what he's saying is, and what he was saying that day, is we need to add extra costs to traditional types of energy and fuel. So that will help the green movement, the alternative forms of energy do better. So basically, we got to raise costs of your energy, so you'll go more with these alternative energies. So then, we're talking about the money moving through the state houses, right? Well, there was some money that, some of this Inflation Reduction Act money comes through if you do EVs. And So we don't know how much we got, but it was in one article that we did get some federal funds. How many of you are aware of this $1.3 billion Scout Motors Volkswagen deal? Okay, well that's good. You guys are pretty informed because this happened super quickly under the radar, practically in the dark of night. The legislators were calling me the second it came on the floor saying, what can you do? And I was on vacation. I wrote that first article. And, you know, is this going to be South Carolina's new cylinder? And then I wrote another article because there was so much more information. So these two articles are in Fitz News. But with folks, there's tons of concerns about this. Volkswagen has not done EVs. EVs aren't selling well. We don't even know if Volkswagen is really total a startup. We don't even know if Volkswagen can do a successful EV. And even if they can, will anybody buy it? And, you know, there's just a long list of issues with that, not to mention that Volkswagen is a European company. So, and now right on the front page of their website, they have what a strong partnership they have with China and how they want to just keep getting that partnership stronger. And on the first page of their website, they talk about their ESGs and how they're going to work to strengthen their ESGs and get their score as high as it can possibly be. So the legislators are telling me, don't worry, we're not going to let the ESG trickle down to the small businesses. Well, I don't know how you're going to stop that. We don't have any law, and we have European law that I think would supersede it anyway. So, but they told me, don't worry about it. So, so why are they doing this? There is a large group of people, the World Economic Forum types and many others in the world, that think they do not like our current capitalistic system, and they would like to turn it into what they call collectivist or stakeholder capitalism. And they get to decide, the stakeholders kind of decide how the companies are run, and they get to decide who the stakeholders are. So you still would own your company, you just don't really get to say how it's run or how it's governed. So that's really a collectivist capitalism, but of course they call it stakeholder capitalism. All right, we made it to the smiley face. You guys that was awesome. I know that was a lot. I know it's an awful lot of information. I do have an article that summarizes all this really in a nice little nugget to read if any of it was confusing. So, while we are the ones, U.S. is really pushing ESG because we are the money printers, we also are the ones who are best equipped to push back on it because we are the only country in the world that has all of these things. We are the only ones that have the civil rights laws that we have and the states' rights and all of that. So what we have is like what's called marble cake federalism, and that helps protect us. So what happened, the truckers in Canada would be much harder to do here because we have the 10th Amendment with the states and we have all these other things. So we have these, we need to take advantage of this. It's up to us as Americans to try and battle this for the rest of the world because a lot of their form of government, they're not able to. And the Great Awakening. So when I started learning about ESGs, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so, nobody's ever going to ever care about this issue. It sounds so boring. But what happened, what got people interested and wanting to know about it was this tweet from Elon Musk. He said, I'm increasingly convinced that corporate ESG is the devil incarnate. And that was on April 3rd of 2022. And that's what got people interested. And he's also made a lot of other good tweets, accurate tweets about it. They really punished him when he bought Twitter with his ESG score. Some other good things. You guys probably heard about the universities are starting to ditch DEI because of that Supreme Court decision. And that will probably trickle down to some of this in the business world too. Some of this DEI stuff that they're doing in corporations and all, I'm hoping will be found to be illegal at some point, I'm hoping. S&P Global, they dropped the ESG numerical value. They're still writing out the paragraphs of ESG on a company, so you still can access that. But they used to give companies a number, and they just stopped doing it. So that shows you that it's starting to, this is about that Supreme Court win. I think that will have an impact in helping push back on ESGs. Jordan is launching an ESG funding investigation. There's a lot of stuff going on with them looking into this more, which is great to see. There's also a lot more resources for average citizens. This is Woke Alert. I signed up for this Consumers Research. You see that on the left. They've done some great work on this. And I'm always hesitant to give my cell phone number, but they've been really good. They only text me maybe once a month and let me know what big corporation and what some big corporation's doing that's absolutely outrageous. And so if you want to get in touch with them and give them your cell phone number, you can keep on top of this. And like I said, they have not abused it. It's been fine. so far. This is a good group, 1792. When I first started giving this talk, I would have people say, well, can you tell us which companies are the bad ones at ESG and which are, and I really couldn't at that time. I said, I really don't know what to tell you. But now this group, that's what they did, is they assessed the policies and practices of 1,000 companies. And so you can go to 1792 Exchange and learn which companies are more pushing this and not. And you can thank those companies that aren't and nicely, maybe politely, those that are, let them know that you're aware. So helpful resources, I think all of these are really good. Consumers Research does great work. ESG Hurts, that's through Heritage, and they have a phenomenal 1-minute video. It is so cute and funny. So if you want to just introduce this topic to someone with ESG and they're not politically into anything, that's a fun, entertaining video. It's ESG Hurts. It's about a Texas farmer or whatever that comes in and tries to get a loan, and it's really cute. So you can send that to your friend. Heartland has done some good work on this, and then also our articles are on our website, the Mom and Pop Alliance.org. This is the article I was telling you about. This is the article that so many people have asked for, and this got a much bigger reach. This was a huge reach. It took me 15 rewrites to get this article right. I put a lot of time into it because it's a really complex topic, and I wanted to tie it in with South Carolina. So if this was a lot for you tonight and you want it, it's Fitz News, Going Woke, What's Really Going On, and I go through and kind of explain it. So the solutions, they're not just going to be legislative. There are going to be 3 different avenues we're going to take to combat this. Free market, like developing a parallel economy. That's a tough one because you can't really develop credit card companies and insurance companies and things overnight, but that's an option. Investment, you see some investment firms offer non-ESG funds, things like that. Judicial and litigation, that's going to be a big one because a lot of this stuff really is illegal. And it's just going to take a while to get through the courts. And, employees can sue, states can sue, things like that. So I think there'll be a lot of litigation. And then what I talked about before, the states. The states is where this is at. This is where we have to do it. So free market examples like Public Square, I belong to that. Second Vote, actually, I think they closed down. I think they didn't get enough funding, and that's the problem with these parallel economy things. We all have to support it, and we're decentralized, so how do you get all the citizens aware and want to support something? So I don't even think that's active anymore. And then Vivek and others, he has his drill and his Strive account that reward companies for not participating in ESG. So you can, invest in that if you wanted to. The good news, we have lots of state lawsuits, states banding together, suing, and our Attorney General is on every single one of these. Every time I see a lawsuit, I look, and yep, South Carolina's there. So we're doing a great job with that. If you see the Attorney General, you can thank him because we are on this. But this one is a super cool one. They're investigating into these 6 major banks, and I saw the questions. I was like, yes, yes. They're basically asking them, why are you, why are you ceding your authority to the UN, basically? Lots of really good questions. So they're doing a great job. There's been lots of different state things happening, different state bills. West Virginia's been good, Texas has been good, several others, I think Missouri, and a lot of lawsuits, things like that going on. By far, the very best bill is the Florida bill. I have a copy of it here. I read it. It's a 51-page bill, but it's kind of big print. It's a very, very hard thing to legislate because it deals with the private sector. And so we don't like to be, telling the private sector what they have to do. So a lot of legislators were telling me there's no way this can get done. But Florida did it, and it's passed and signed by the governor. So now we have it. Their government system is a little different from ours, but now we have an example. So this whole thing, we can't do it, doesn't fly with me as much anymore. So Florida is pretty protected on a lot of this stuff. They've done some great work. Where do we stand? Our treasurer has been excellent. He's never liked ESG. He never liked BlackRock to begin with. So we didn't have a lot with BlackRock. We only had about $200 million. We pulled it all out. They tried to nail him on CNBC for that and everything, but he's done great work. He gets it. Attorney General, I told you he's done some great work. Where we are weak is with our legislature. They passed a weak bill that just had to do with proxy voting only. It's not going to really do that much. It was, I'm glad they addressed it, but it's not going to do much. Senator Bennett has a stronger bill, and like I said, it's S583. Like I said, this is a very hard thing to legislate on, so but they are working on it in the Senate, and we're going to be really pushing this in the Senate when the session starts. Bringing lots of popcorn down. So, another thing the Mom and Pop did, we launched a small business caucus back in April of 2022. We didn't have one in our state. These are just some things of what the Mom and Pop Alliance has been doing to push back. We went down, brought the popcorn. That was before April was in office. She had no plans at this point in this photo of ever running for office. And then she decided she wanted me to run. I talked her into running instead, and so it all ended great. And the legislators sent us this picture. They love getting the popcorn, so that's great. This thing, I think some of you are aware of this. So what this talks about is a state compact, and some people call it a multi-state alliance. And it's where states band their political power together, and these states have all pushed back on ESGs, and the governor has signed it. So they're banding together in a multi-state alliance. It's Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, ton of states. South Carolina's not on here. So we are doing this card campaign. Some of you may be aware. I know Bonnie gave me some cards tonight. Signing these cards. It does ask for your email, but the email will stay with me. I will not abuse it. I'm not going to let it go anywhere. And what people are doing is they're taking a bunch of cards. So I have a little receipt thing that you can fill out. Say, I'll take 20 and get them signed for you and get them back to you. You can mail them back, or we can make arrangements. You can drop them off at my business, whatever. So some people take 10, some people take 100, and they're getting these cards signed and getting them back to me. So then, once we have the cards, we're going to lay them all out. We're going to get drone footage of the cards, and then we're going to redact the emails and get them to the governor. I've talked to the lieutenant governor twice on this, and I don't have a reason why the governor won't sign. My guess is it might have to do with these multinational corporations. He doesn't want to upset the apple cart. I'm not sure. I don't know, because they haven't told me. She did say he was willing to write a letter saying he doesn't like ESGs, and I said, well, he needs to sign on with this, so in my opinion. So anyway, that's a project that we are working on to show that the citizens care about this, and the citizens pressure him. Now, I know he's not running for office again, but even so, just that video will be good to raise awareness on this and to pressure the legislature to try and take this issue more seriously. And there's the copy of the card. I brought a bunch of them tonight. If you guys want to sign any out, let me know. And so, what you can do, let people know about this ESGs. Like I said, it's being kept under the radar for a very long time. I hope you will consider becoming a member of the Mom and Pop Alliance. I'll have my computer over here if you want to join. It is $100 a year. You do not have to own a business. If you just believe in our mission and you want to be a friend of Mom and Pop, you can do it that way. Every penny of that money goes towards operating costs. My husband and I donate our time to this organization. We do not take any salary, and we do not seek any government grants. That's how most nonprofits function, through the grants, but we don't do that. So the only way we can survive is through the support of y'all, and also it helps us. The bigger we are, the more impact we'll have down in the State House. So I know times are tight, and that we do try and keep the dues low compared to other business organizations, but so I hope you'll consider at least looking into that. And if you join tonight, I also have little gifts that you can select a gift if you'd like. Any other speaking opportunities? We do have an ESG tab on our website, and that's where you can get more information and our articles, and whatever you can do in getting those cards signed would be wonderful. And if ESGs are impacting you or your business, please let us know, because having specific real-life examples is the best thing we can have on this topic. Also, 2 other quick things in helping promote Mom and Pop. We have bumper stickers. If you promise to use one, take one if you'll actually put it on your car. This is worth about $300 in advertising for us. And then we have these. If you have a brick and mortar and you join the mom and pop, we have these little decals you can put on your business so when people see that when they're walking in. And let me see. Yeah, so you guys were awesome. I know it was a lot of information, but you seemed like you were really paying attention throughout the whole thing, so I want to thank you. I'm happy to stay for questions. And if you want to join, there's a QR code, and like I said, you do not have to be a business owner to join. But if you can't join, maybe you can support us in other ways, because it's really important that we 430,000 businesses have a stronger voice. Also protection for anything that might come down in the future. You know, if we had had a mom and pop alliance before COVID, especially in states like Michigan and California, they wouldn't have been able to do a lot of things they did. So I think it's really important that we have this organization as a counterbalance for down there, because it's very needed. So thank you so much. You guys were great. I told you it was a lot, but you
No, that was wonderful, and you give Diane another hand. That was a. I know I've kept up. Diane, she may not remember. We actually met the first time back in the old Greenville RLC days years ago.
Oh yeah, wow, that was a while ago.
Yeah, that was a while back. Diane does a lot across the state, and she volunteers her time freely to make people aware of these things. This is where I learned about ESG. And I'll give you a real world example. So I work for small business here locally. I say small business. We have about 90 employees. And we make, we'll say, ruggedized computer components. And we work with large corporations all the time. We don't sell to individuals usually. They can buy from us. But most of the time it's these large corporations. And they have these vendor documents they ask you to fill out. Well, some of them are straightforward, like, you know, what's your business size, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. Some of them, it gets into the ESG stuff. So they'll say, what is your plan for diversity, equity, inclusion? Or what is your plan for your, you know, your social credit? How are you caring for the environment and all these things? I'm like, look, man, I just want to sell your computers. Like, what do you do with it? It's your business. So that's a real world application where it's impacting a business in Liberty because somebody else from a faraway land decided, hey, these guys need to get in line. And, you know, they could say, well, we're not going to buy from you because your score's not right. So, and just hit the road. You got a question in the back?
Well, we don't have a law against ESG, and I'm not sure they have to follow South Carolina law, but if that's the case, then we would need a law, and then we don't even have that. Florida has the law, we don't. So, no, that's what they're telling people. They don't expect people to look into it any deeper. That's what I've been hearing, too. And then they'll tell me, don't worry, we're not going to let that happen here. Okay, how? Well, we're not going to let that happen. So, you know, that's what they tell people, but we don't have a law, and even if we did, I'm not sure it would. Not that I'm aware of. I don't know how they could do that because we don't have laws addressing that in any way. And in a way, it's because we are a very business-friendly state. We don't have a lot of laws I mean, we have regulations for how the business runs, but we don't have anything about ESGs. No, we're going to have a law to push back against it because Europe has the law, we don't.
I was at that same meeting, and I believe, if I remember right, Davey said that it would be addressed at the next session coming up in January.
Yeah, that's not, I don't know how serious they are about passing a law. We got some real pushback this session. We thought for sure we were going to be able to even just pulling our funds out of BlackRock would be easier than the ESG law that Florida did. I mean, Florida pulled their funds out of BlackRock a long time ago. We can't even get our retirement funds out of BlackRock. So I don't know if we're going to pass an ESG law. I don't know. They'll say they passed a law, and they did pass a very weak bill that will help with proxy voting that says that our ESG fund money will not be used for that will impact proxy voting, so it's not used for these purposes. There's no real way, I don't know, to prove that, but even if we did, that's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is that our money remains with BlackRock, and we are bringing in these companies that are going to push ESG.
Diane, is there like a 1 or 2 bullet points from the Florida law that they were able that makes it work? That it's a very complicated issue, like you said, but
it is.
in the Florida law, is there 1 or 2 things they did that really make a difference that maybe we could focus on?
They did some things to help protect people from not losing their financial services. Like I've been told that Palmetto Armory lost their banking just because they're a gun company. They were able to, I've been told by a senator, now I have not verified this, but I was told by a senator that Bank of America stopped Palmetto Armory, just like cut off their account and told them you got to go elsewhere. So we need to do some things to protect people to be sure they can get financial services and they don't have to risk that being cut off if they're not the right company or they're doing things the right way. The problem with that is you got the Banking Association saying, well, if you tell us we have to do all loans, well, what if we just don't do farm loans? It's not that we're discriminating against them. We just don't do them because we don't know anything about farming. I think that can easily be answered. So that's what's been blocking anything really happening for protecting financial services. And I get that. The banks, they don't want to say we have to give a loan to every single thing. But I think the way that can be dealt with is, say, if you are a smaller bank and we decide the size, this doesn't apply to you. But all big banks should be able to give loans to every single type of business. So it should just apply to big banks and be sure that so what happened to like Moms for Liberty doesn't happen to South Carolinians.
I'm just thinking, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but could you not like say ESG scores cannot be used to in the calculation for this, for like applying for a loan? ESG scores cannot be used. I hate to say something like that because I'm a big free market person. And
well, that's the problem. It bumps up against that because now you're starting to say, and it may not be, how are you going to prove it's an ESG score necessarily? Sometimes I don't know if they really come out and say it. I have an anecdotal story and I can't prove it. Well, like that when I give that example of individual credit scores, my brother lives in Florida, of all places, and he has this was before they passed the law. This was like 2 years ago. He had just read my article the day this happened, and I don't know if this is ESG, so might be conspiracy on my part, but he was trying to get insurance on his boat, and he always pays his premiums a year in advance. He's 60, he's low risk, he's not been in accidents, and he could not get anyone to give him boat insurance. And he said, I don't understand this. I've had a boat forever. I've never had a problem getting insurance. And they said, well, you're high risk. And he said, well, how can I be high risk? And they said, well, you're a 4 out of 10. We have new metrics. They did not call it ESG. They would not call it ESG. He tried to call back and find out. He finally got a company to cover him, but it was more expensive. Was that an ESG discrimination?